Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 level podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back to our 14th episode this week, where we will be breaking down last Sunday's game versus the Titans, discussing news around the NFL, and previewing this upcoming game Monday night versus the Buffalo Bills. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats 300 level pod for up to the minute updates and commentary for news of the day. So, Kevin, just to start off, Patriots played the number one Titans in the AFC last week. Granted, the Titans were kind of a shell of themselves, missing 8 starters, 5 of their best players, but overall, they were playing one of the top teams in the AFC. What was your overall takeaways from the game?
Yeah, I think the overall takeaways was one, you're definitely not facing the Titans that began the season and will probably end the season. And you kind of got really lucky in that aspect. But number two, it was a pretty hard fought game. They're very mentally tough, the Titans. They did play a lot of bully football. So it was a very big win, brings the Patriots into second in the AFC. It was a good win against a good mentally tough team. So every win's a good win. So you take the win, kind of build off of it for Buffalo. But I think there were some instances where they have some things to work on after this game. It wasn't perfect, but ends up putting them in the right direction and hopefully puts them in a good spot for Buffalo.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's kind of tough to fully evaluate because, like I was saying earlier, they were missing 5 of their best players. AJ Brown is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, or one of the best young wide receivers in the NFL. Derrick Henry, before his injury, was probably the leading candidate for MVP. Also missing Julio Jones, Bud Dupree, some other starters. So it's tough to fully evaluate. But it was kind of good because it showed how resilient this team was. First half of the game was pretty close, but then in the second half, the Patriots pulled away, which shows that they might have played down a little bit the first half to their opponent, but they're able to fix things around at halftime. 4th straight game of shutting out their opponent in the second half, which is pretty impressive. They were going up against a very good coach in Vrabel, who's a really good defensive mind and knows Belichick pretty well. And they were able to fix some things, make some adjustments throughout the game, and be a pretty good team. Like you said, there were some things they definitely have to improve on, and I think it's kind of a good thing that it happened this week versus the Titans instead of later on in the season in big games versus the Bills or even in the playoffs. So they found some weaknesses that they can try and rectify, so it doesn't come up again later on in the season.
Yeah, exactly. I think this key thing to add with that is this is probably the closest game to a kind of playoff type of game against another team. Just the way how tough and kind of resilient that Titans team is, even if they were depleted a lot. I think kind of how hard they fought against the Patriots was a really good test just to see how the Patriots were doing, how mentally tough this team is. So I think that was just another kind of key aspect to the game.
One thing I would say, which I think we'll get into a little bit, I know the Titans were missing some of their best players, but in a way, it kind of showed me that I don't really fear this Titans team too much, even if they come back full strength. They were missing Derrick Henry, who's probably the best running back in the NFL, but they still gave up 270 yards rushing, and they still won the game by 20 something points. Ryan Tannehill, he was missing his 2 best wide receivers, but he's shown once again Belichick knows how to stop Ryan Tannehill. The last 2 games the Patriots played Tannehill, in the playoffs he threw for only 72 yards. This week he only threw for 93 yards. So 2 games combined, only about 160 yards. So even if you do add AJ Brown and Julio Jones back, I still don't. The only way I see the Titans beating them in the playoffs is Mike Vrabel pulling something out of his ass and having a great game plan like he did in 2019, or the Patriots shooting themselves in the foot.
I think I just kind of will disagree on that. I think how close the game really was, I think it was a lot closer than the actual score was based on the amount of turnovers and everything that happened at the end of the game. I think if you think about how the Titans felt flying home, do you think they felt better about themselves or worse about themselves after this game? I think they'd feel better about themselves, where we hung in with them through 3 quarters without 5 of our starters. What could we do when we have everyone back in the playoffs? I think they're actually feeling a lot better about themselves after this game, based on how kind of close they kept it. So,
No, I agree with that point. The one
mhm,
thing I was thinking as a fan was knowing Belichick, Ryan Tannehill still doesn't scare me. And usually Belichick's able to take away your number one threat. So if you put Jackson on AJ Brown or Julio Jones,
mhm,
and then you can just focus in on stopping Derrick Henry, then I think that it showed that even they were able to run. But if you were to focus in on just knowing Derrick Henry is getting the ball,
mhm,
probably two out of every three plays, you focus in on stopping him, and then knowing that Ryan Tannehill can't beat you.
mhm.
That's more of what I was saying. I think that the Titans probably feel good after seeing how they play the first three quarters. But as a Patriots fan, going into the game or early on in the season, the Titans didn't really scare me too much because I don't have faith in Ryan Tannehill. But that's more along the lines of what I was trying to say.
All right. Yeah, that's a fair point. I think we kind of discussed the pass defense did pretty well in this game. Not totally unsurprising based on having Tannehill and having um, him throw to players that were probably in the practice squad 2 weeks ago. So that wasn't a huge surprise. The run defense overall, though, was much worse. It was pretty atrocious um, compared to what we've seen. And if you let any team run for 270 yards, you had a bad day.
Yeah.
And I can't say how many times that's happened where a team is actually lost when that happens. So I think that's just one really big question mark now after this. Was this a blip on the radar? Was it something where it's a continuation from the beginning of the season and maybe we just didn't face a good enough offensive line the last few weeks? So maybe we've been kind of deceived a little bit by how this team is faced against the run. What were your thoughts on on that run defense at all?
Yeah, it was definitely pretty concerning.
Mm-hmm.
First 4 or 5 weeks, their run defense was by far the weakest point of this defense, and the last maybe 6-7 weeks they looked really good. We thought that maybe they turned a corner. It was just an extension of the preseason, but this game kind of brings back some of those worries where in the playoffs, at least in the AFC, we're not going to be facing many top quarterbacks outside of Patrick Mahomes. So teams are going to be running the ball. Derrick Henry, if he comes back, Bills have a pretty good run game. Um,
No,
with
they don't.
with the mobility of Josh Allen. Josh Allen adds to it.
Mhm.
Lamar Jackson. What I was essentially trying to say is there aren't really too many quarterbacks that are going to beat you. So if the run defense is kind of reverting to their old ways, that can be a way where the Patriots might actually lose in the playoffs or lose a lot earlier. Or even just the rest of the season, you could lose to the Bills or the Colts, where you might lose the division.
Exactly. Yeah. I think one of the biggest things too, just to kind of talk about with this, um, was that the run defense, it wasn't more so scheme in this game where that was causing the issue. It was actually just being physically pushed around at the line. Um, and that's actually a lot more concerning than if it was something scheme, where
Yeah.
if it was scheme, you could say, well, Vrabel really knows this Patriots defense really well. He knows the different stunts and twists and everything that they're trying to do. They can kind of counteract that. And run that way. And it wasn't scheme. It was Carl Davis being kind of pushed around by their center. I'm blanking on his name right now. But he had a really good game. And I think that's how you can kind of look at this team is how the center play is. And that's kind of what kind of controls the line. And then the other thing was I think Matthew Judon had probably his worst game as a Patriot so far. He didn't really do much in the pass rush, but they weren't throwing as much. But they also, one of the kind of key aspects was in that rushing attack, they kept on rushing also not only up the middle and battling Carl Davis, but they also, when they ran to the edge, they ran on Judon's side a majority of the time, and he was getting kind of pushed around. And he's a really good pass rusher. And he's been okay in the run so far, but maybe he's showing it. Maybe they might have caught something on tape where he could be a little bit more of a liability in that run defense compared to Mikal Van Noy or something like that. But it's just something to kind of keep the eye and see if other teams do it, or if it was maybe just a blip. It wasn't something to be too concerned about, but that is something that that they did try and attack a lot, and it worked out well for them. So I think that's just something we have to keep in mind the next couple games and see if other teams do the same thing and if it works out for them or not.
No, that's a very, very good point. I think overall, Judon has been average, maybe above average in the run game.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not one of the best like run defenders, but that's also not his role.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really the reason why the Patriots brought him. But like you said, this was one of his least good games this week. So we'll have to see how it is going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing I just wanted to say on the passing game is or the pass defense was Tannehill actually started the game pretty well. He started the game 8 for 8 with a touchdown. But the rest of the way, the Patriots defense held him to 3 for 13 with 0 TDs and 1 interception the rest of the way. So usually what we see in the NFL is usually one of the second drive opposing offenses are able to do well because pretty much all the plays are scripted. The first 15 or so plays of the game are usually scripted and they know what they're going to do. And then as the game goes on, usually defenses adjust and then there's less scripting and then offenses have to adjust to the defense's adjustment. And we've seen this a lot where the Browns game, the Chargers game, even the Titans game, or Titans did they score the first drive or were they getting close?
First drive they ended
second
up
drive they
having
did.
to punt. They went 3 and out.
But the Chargers game and Browns game, we saw them score on their first drive. And then even the Chargers game, we saw them do well on the second drive. Titans game, they did well on the second drive where these are more scripted plays. Then as the game goes on, the defense starts to turn things around. So that's just something to consider where the pass defense wasn't great the first couple drives. But then as the game went around, they went back to their old ways of what we've seen the last 6-7 weeks.
Yeah, I think we kind of mentioned that previously before. It's kind of holding through throughout the season. Kind of switching gears and going to the offense. I think the offensive line is something we've been talking about a lot. And it kind of was a tale of two different stories. And it was actually kind of, I guess, 3 different stories. One would be the passing protection, how it was. I think it was actually pretty good in this game. I don't think Mac was pressured too often. Besides those blitzes coming from the second level, and that's not actually even really the offensive line's kind of role in pass protection. That's the quarterback's role in picking that up. And then we saw the rushing attack, which was probably one of their worst rushing games of the season, especially through the first 3 quarters. And I think the large issue in the running game was from the tackle positions. I don't think Wynn and Brown had a really good game. I think that kind of caused some of the issues with that. And again, the Titans have a really good rushing defense, and they also Vrabel knows the Patriots well. They know they're going to be pulling guards. They know what holes they're going to be running through. They know a lot about these players overall. So that's just another thing as well. But any other kind of additions with that to add? What you thought about the pass protection, and maybe kind of those secondary level blitzes that we've seen for a second week in a row that Mac had kind of difficulty.
I think just going on the running tackle, like you said, the offensive line wasn't great the first 3 quarters, but what we've seen, even I believe the Falcons game where, or maybe I'm thinking of a different game, but they weren't really great the first few quarters. But then as the game goes on, the offensive line is wearing out the defense, where the fourth quarter, they're finally able to come through. And that's what we saw this week. So there's other games where the Patriots are running great the entire game, but the physicality of this offensive line it looks like it's starting to wear down defenses as the game goes on and allows them to run better. Just hopefully with some of the big games coming up that they're able to be very efficient in the run game, because the running game helps open up the passing game and it adds just a different layer and allows you not to be one dimensional. I thought, like you said, the offensive line held up pretty well in the pass game. Interesting stat I saw was that in their Patriots 6-game win streak, Mac Jones has only been pressured 23% of his dropbacks, which is 3rd best in the NFL. which is pretty impressive considering the first 5-6 weeks of the season he was being pressured 35 to 40% of his dropbacks. So the turnaround has been really good. It's just the issues. We saw this in the Falcons game where two or three of their drives ended because on third down, a delayed blitz got Mac Jones. And then this week, another drive, he was sacked on a third down, delayed blitz from the secondary or second level. And it's just something that hopefully they're able to work on in practice going forward, because that's killed at least 3 of their drives in the last 2 games where they could have gotten points. And it's just something where it's tough for the offensive line to really protect against that. The only way you can really fully block that is if you have a running back or someone in the backfield that stays to watch out for those, but then that takes away someone else in the passing game that's able to be a receiver. Hopefully it's just something they work on and Mac gets used to recognizing that and either throwing the ball sooner or doing something else. But it is a little bit of concern that it's 2 weeks in a row where we saw that. And then I wouldn't be shocked if we see the Bills try and do the same thing going for this upcoming week.
Oh yeah, I totally expect to see this again from the Bills and other teams until they're able to kind of stop it and kind of go with it. And like I said, too, just a little background on what the protection scheme is. The line is only really their assignment is to block the down lineman, and the quarterback is supposed to identify the mic in the scheme and identify the fifth person that the line is responsible for. So that any of those secondary level blitzes is something that's the responsibility of the quarterback. So what Mac should be doing in this instance is either seeing it and getting the ball out quicker, or adjusting one of the routes so that way he can kind of go into the blitz and attack that hole in the scheme. And that's just not something he's done so far. And I think the biggest issue with it is that he's really good at looking downfield and keeping his eyes, trying to see what's going on. And I'd say like 95% of the time, that's a really good trait to have. It's just he has to have just a little bit, some awareness of what's going on around that too. And I think that's something he will pick up with time. It's going to be something we'll continue to work on. And I don't see it as a big issue going forward.
Yeah, just the only tricky thing about it from Mac's point of view is it's not like they're blitzing right as the play starts. It's maybe like a 1.5 second delay where the linemen already are on their guys, and then second level comes along. So by the time the person blitzing is at the line of scrimmage, they're already at a full steam ahead, and Mac doesn't have too much time to fully react. But hopefully it's something they're able to work on going forward. Yeah.
And there's little things too that are little kind of keys that they give away where maybe they're not actually playing leverage as they're supposed to if it's coming from the corner, or maybe the way they're kind of creeping in. There's a few of the plays you could tell just how they're lining up. It just didn't look right. And I think that's something that's going to come with time too, for him to recognize, hey, this guy's not actually lined up how he's supposed to be. Either he's just lined up incorrectly and I can beat the route that way, or he could be coming on a blitz. So it's just something he's got to pay a little bit more attention to. And it's going to take time. He's only been in the league for 12 weeks. So that should come with time. Any kind of additional points you want to talk about the Titans? I think we covered kind of a good bit about Vrabel, Tannehill, and the running attack. Anything else you looked at on that?
Nothing really. I just thought Vrabel coached the game very well. And I thought even it was probably further, like it wasn't as close in the first half as it should have been, where there were just a lot of mistakes from the Titans, either penalties or miscues that if they had a full team, all their starters, they might have not seen. But I think Vrabel has shown that he's a really good coach, and that's usually in the playoffs, coaching is what wins, coaching and then a good defense. So I still don't have faith in Tannehill that he'll be good enough quarterback to beat the Patriots, since they're pretty one-dimensional on offense. But Vrabel is a good enough coach that has shown that he can possibly beat them. So that's just the only really takeaways. Other things or additions I had to say about the Titans.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's I don't have any complaints with what you're arguing there. Going to Mac Jones, we kind of assess his play every single week. I'll just start off by saying I think the stats in this game kind of lie if you're just looking at the stat sheet at the end of the day. Over 300 yards, over 120 in the quarterback rating, 2 touchdowns. I think 2 touchdowns. Yeah, two
Yeah, two
touchdowns.
touchdowns.
And I don't think it was a great game by him. I don't think it was a good game by him. I don't think it was a bad game by him though. I think it was just an okay game. And that's something where having actually been at the game and watching it up from the 300 section, you kind of get that all 22 look without even having to look at the tape afterwards. So there was a lot of throws in this game where Mac just wasn't as accurate as he used to be. I think he got bailed out by his receivers a lot in this game. He didn't have the accuracy like we've been used to seeing, and it could just be a one game thing. I don't think it was the cold, but it's something we could see going on the rest of the season. But he's got big enough hands where I don't think it's an issue. And he was throwing the ball high a lot in this game. He had a lot of reads that he didn't make the right read on, which is not something that's like him. But it's also going to happen for a rookie quarterback. He's not going to be perfect every week. So it wasn't like he had a bad game. But it wasn't a great game either. I think he was just okay. He played decently well, but I would say my kind of overall grading would be anywhere from like probably about a B- or so. Wasn't great, wasn't bad. Was a little bit average or better than average. So I'd say that from that. I think even that pass that he had to Myers for 30 something or 40 yards was up there for a while and a little underthrown, and it probably should have been picked off. And the only reason why the safety played the way he did instead of trying to go for the ball is he was afraid because it was so underthrown that he would end up actually running into Myers and causing a DPI. So that's why he ended up jumping up for it to try and swat it rather than actually try and go for the ball. Even though it was a decently well ball and Myers actually had a better catch in that, it still wasn't a perfect pass. But he did have some really good passes in this game too. The Bourne touchdown on that fade was an excellent throw, excellent catch. He had some good plays as well. It's just I think the national media, just looking at these stats, they're not watching the games, they're not seeing they see the box score and they're like, oh, he was terrific. They won by this many points, but they're not actually watching and seeing how he played. And I don't think he had a great game. I don't think it was his worst game. The Saints game was probably his worst. It wasn't like that, but I think it was just okay. And that's not bad either. So
yeah. I think part of the issue is on the telecast, since I was watching on the telecast and wasn't able to see the all 22 look like you were at the game. You can't really see all of that from the television's point of view. I thought overall he had a pretty decent game. I'd say maybe a B. I'd go a little higher than you. There were definitely some throws that he missed. There was the Hunter Henry throw where he completely overthrew, where it was wide open for a touchdown. There's the screen pass to the running back on the left-hand side where it looked like it just slipped out his hand or didn't really know what happened. There are a couple other plays where he threw it to Jacoby Myers and Myers pretty much got killed by the defensive back, which caused an incompletion. There are a couple of other throws here and there. One where the Titans almost picked it off inside the red zone, where it was just a bad decision. The Myers play for 30 yards that you were talking about earlier, I thought it was a good decision. If you actually look at the all 22 view, when he threw it, it was wide open. But like you said, it was just a little underthrown, which allowed the safety, I believe, to make a good play on it, but just missed it. And then it was a really good catch by Myers. But overall, I thought he had a pretty good game, but part of it's, like I said, the telecast version, you can't really see everything. You can't see all the reads and where he should have gone one way versus another.
Yeah, I think just one thing that too I've kind of noticed over the last few weeks, and it's something that Brady did as well, so it's not ever going to be perfect. But Mac does seem to kind of get locked into Myers and a lot and try and go to him first. And we saw it with Brady, with Edelman, Brady with Welker, where kind of get fixated a little bit too much. And that's kind of how this offense is with the slot anyway. But it'd be nice just to kind of see him make a little bit better reads and kind of go more, try and find the open guy a little bit more rather than trying to maybe force it into Myers. But that's just something just to keep an eye on. But there's a few times where he went to Myers where he had a wide open Henry, and I get Henry's maybe not his first read there, but it's something where Myers is covered. You can check on Henry first and then go back
Yeah.
to him. So,
And I think part of that just comes with time. The more he
mhm.
gets used to, the more he plays, the more he reads defenses. I think that's going to come along with time.
Yeah.
And I think just going about best games, like obviously wasn't his best game, but wasn't his worst. Worst, I'd say the Saints game, Chargers game, even though I blame that more on McDaniels than him. And then the Panthers game, I think those three at least were worse games than this.
Mhm.
Wasn't great. Wasn't like the Jets game. Wasn't like the Browns game where those were two of his better games, but
Yeah.
wasn't bad.
And the thing is, he was still they were moving the ball really well on
Yeah.
offense in the passing game. It's just that he wasn't as sharp as he's been before.
Yep.
And that's going to happen. It happened with Brady. It happened with other quarterbacks, and he's a rookie again. It's
Yep.
going to happen. Moving on, 3 up, 3 down. Could do a little bit differently this week. We can kind of go back and forth
Okay.
for our ups, and then same for our downs. So I'll go first with my up. We had actually talked about this before, the podcast, and we pretty much had the exact same 4 up. So I'll say my first up. We can kind of both talk about them, and then you can say your next and go on so forth. So my first up was Bourne. I think he had a terrific game. He's been getting better and better each game, and I think we've talked about this before. He's probably their best playmaker, wide receiver on this team. He's quick. He's really good with the ball on his hands, and we saw that on this game, especially with that 41-yard touchdown that he had.
Yeah.
He ended up faking out the cornerback with that head shake. It made some really good plays. Had that stiff arm. Had a terrific block by Myers. And that was a smart block as well to avoid a penalty as well.
Yeah.
It's just a really good game overall. That touchdown pass that he had to start the game on that fade, which I despise fade calls, and I don't think this team is set up for one. Maybe with Henry, I don't think any of these receivers are built for it, and I think it's a completely low percentage play. But it ended up having a perfect pass and a perfect catch to pull it off, and I think that was a great play by him. I would just any additions that you'd like to add on him?
No, I actually had him as my number 1 overall up as well.
Mhm.
As I've been saying the last 12 weeks, even before the season, I am a big Kendrick Bourne guy.
Mhm.
When they signed him, I thought he would kind of take over the Edelman role where he's very fast and shifty.
Mhm.
Kind of a different player, but like that kind of elusiveness. And then we kind of saw that on that touchdown catch where once he got the ball, he made really good movement and able to break away for a touchdown. He's very fast, very shifty, and surprisingly, he's actually having the best season of any free agent wide receiver so far. 42 catches, 623 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's only 7 catches short of his career high. He's 43 or 44 yards short of his career high, and he's already tied his career high in touchdowns. And that's only 12 games into the season. He's having a really good year, and the energy he brings to the offense is really good. I think along the lines of what you're saying on that fade pass for his first touchdown,
Mhm.
I agree. I'm not really a big fan of it either. If you have Gronk or Randy Moss, that's one thing because they're so physically imposing compared to defensive backs where
Mhm.
they're able to jump up and be so much higher than the defensive backs, but you don't really have that on this team. Maybe Henry, but I don't think even Henry. Maybe Jonnu Smith if he starts learning the offense a little better and starts
Mhm.
getting into a groove. But right as the offense is right now, it just took a perfect catch, perfect throw, and it was even well defended too. It's not
Mhm.
like it was really good catch. It just had to be perfect like it was. So not really much more to add other than that. Just you have to keep. I guess one more thing is he's leading the Patriots in receiving yards, even though he's only on offense about 55% of the snaps.
Mhm.
So just keep getting him on the field, get him the ball more and more, and I think you'll see even more and more plays like this.
Exactly. Who's the next up?
Next up, I kept going back and forth, but I'll have to go with Big Kick Nick.
All right.
5 field goals in 6 attempts. Only missed was a 50-plus yarder. All his misses this year are 50-plus yards, 3 extra points. He gave you 18 points overall. He's leading the league in kicking. He's just kicking from a historic. The last 2+ years, or ever since he signed with the Patriots, he's pretty much been kicking at a historic rate. He's, I believe, 1 field goal shot. I'm going to probably regret this. but he's, I think, one field goal shy of tying the all-time record for consecutive field goals made inside 50 yards. I believe he's at 50 consecutive, and the record's 51 by Ryan Suckup. So, I mean, he's kicking at an unbelievable pace. He's probably one of the MVPs on this team just with how reliable he is. I think part of it is because why he's kicking so many field goals is an effectiveness of the offense when they get inside the 35, which is something we've talked about a lot. Some weeks they're able to correct it, other weeks they're not. I think, kind of side note, but going forward, when you face the Bills, Colts, and then in the playoffs, you can't be settling for these field goals like they had to do this week against the Titans or some other weeks where you're kicking 5-6 field goals. But when you do have to kick it, I think even Devin McCourty said, once he goes out to kick it, you pretty much know it's a guaranteed 3 points. And he's just one of their biggest weapons because of his accuracy. And he just had another great game.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I have really much to add, but it's crazy to think about how good they've had it at the kicker position, going from Vinatieri to Gostowski to Folk. And Folk has actually probably been the most accurate out of all of them, which is insane to think because just a few years ago when he was on the Bucks, we saw him miss, I think, 3 field goals that game, which ended up helping him lose the game.
And that was his last game until the Patriots signed him 2 years later.
Yeah. So it's just crazy to think how much he's turned around his career. And it's been automatic. It's just every time he goes out there, expecting him to make it. And it's just been a nice thing to have for this team because they need a lot of field goals because they are anemic a little bit in the red zone and the high red zone especially. So it's been really good to have. I think the next up to talk about
one minor thing I just want to add on Folk, just showing how impressive this season is. He's not known of having a big leg, but he's already tied the Patriots season record for most 50 plus yard field goals with 5. And we're only 12 games into the season. So that's just something else wanted to add on is before, if it was within like 40, 45 yards, you knew it was automatic, but now it's pretty much showing that even from 50 yards, he's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. I think the next one to kind of talk about was Jakobi Meyers. I think he also had another really good game for himself. Has been a key player in this offense. Had a lot of good yards. Was really good in the blocking on that Bourne touchdown, and he knew enough to slightly get in there, not get a legal block in the back, but also not get that new penalty that they have where you can't block facing your own end zone.
I think back facing the end zone.
So I kind of slyly slid in there with that kind of like shoulder check to not really kind of light him up and get a penalty there. So I think he just had a really good game. I don't think there's really much I can really say other than that he kind of bailed out Mac on a few plays, and he had that really good catch too for that 30-something yarder that he had. So anything to add on him?
Not much. I was deciding between Folk and Myers as my number 2 and number 3. I'm not sure if you went with Myers as your 2 or Folk as your 2. But like you said, 5 catches, 98 yards. He's just been reliable. If Mac throws to him, pretty much, most of the time he's going to catch it. And kind of showing not a perfect number 1, 2 wide receiver in Myers and Bourne, but showing pretty reliable. Just good in the blocking game, good, and they'll catch pretty much anything that they throw to you. And then I think just going with my number 4, I'll go with is JC Jackson. Just another game where he's just been showing he's dominant. He's a ball hawk, another interception, tied the NFL record for most interceptions in your first 4 years, and he still has 5 games to go. Had a key forced fumble on that second long run by the Titans offense. And I know he was a little inconsistent the first 5-6 weeks of the season, but ever since, I'd say the last 7, 8, 9 weeks, he's been one of, if not the best cornerbacks in the NFL. And then I saw something where I believe either PFF passing or quarterback rating against or actual passer rating against, he's number 1 in the NFL with 33. I think it's PFF's quarterback rating. Next best is 56. So he has almost a 20-point difference in the second best cornerback in the NFL in man cover or in coverage thrown against. So he's just been really good lately and something they're going to need going forward.
Yeah, I also had Jackson as well as my fourth. I think he had a really good game. He's been really well for them down the stretch. He's been solid at corner. They're not throwing at him, and when they are, he's breaking up most of the passes. And he's kind of a bull hawk. Even though the interception that he had in the end zone wasn't his fault. He ended up catching it. It was kind of one of those kind of Duron Harmon
Yeah,
interceptions
I
where
was thinking the
it
same
kind of
thing.
just fell into his lap. He's still around the ball. He still has good hands, still catches it. He has the awareness of it. So that's just one thing that you would want. And that forced fumble that he had was an excellent kind of recovery. It shows his speed. It also shows his drive and that he doesn't take a play off. We saw that in I think the Chargers game too,
Yeah,
where he tracked down a player, and it's kind of that Benjamin Watson play from the Broncos.
yeah,
We've always seen it twice from him, so it shows his drive and willingness to compete. So that's something that was really good, and it wasn't great ball handling skills by the running back. He probably also should have had that ball in the other hand,
yeah,
but it's also being aware of where to hit the ball, when to hit it, and have that awareness too from Mills to not try and scoop it, but to use your body as a shield for the sideline, so that way it doesn't bounce out of bounds. So I think that was just a really good play overall by three of the players. It's actually really McCourty forcing him back inside to shove him into Jackson, and then Jackson knocking the ball out, and Mills having that awareness to use his body as a shield. So, but I think overall Jackson had a really good game, and it's a shame because I don't think, knowing how the Patriots do things, I don't think he's going to be on this team for the long-term future. Because I can't see them paying $100 million for a cornerback, based on what they paid for before. But it could happen. I definitely could see him at least franchising him this year, possibly franchising the second year, and maybe they might be able to work out kind of a 2 to 3 year deal where,
yeah.
hey, we're going to pay you this, but we can kind of offset some of the money, just to make it easier, where you're getting the same money, but we can kind of shift things around. It's not as hard to manipulate as a cap as a tag situation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think just a couple things going along that. The fumble that he caused when on the telecast, when you saw him coming from behind, I actually had a feeling that, knowing the way Jackson plays, he might actually force a fumble right here, just because of we've seen it before, and he's been pretty good at forcing fumbles, pretty good at tackling. I thought just before it even happened that this might be something that might happen. Just talking about some of his stats, I believe the last 4 games he's been targeted 12 times. He's allowed 2 catches in those 12 targets. He's had 4 pass breakups and has 4 interceptions, which is insane. So 0 passer rating against. Talking about his long-term future, I definitely see them tagging him this upcoming free agency. I could see them signing him long-term. Just depends on where the money is, and if he's willing to help them with essentially how the money goes forward, because the salary cap's going up next season to, I think, from 180 to 210. They are going to be close up against it this year, but I think that they'll probably tag him. But then with the new TV deals, I think it's going to be going up a lot in the future 3-4 years. So I could see them doing that. They have paid cornerbacks top dollar in the past. When they signed Stephon Gilmore before the 2017 season, I believe they signed him to the biggest contract ever by a cornerback. So they have done it in the past. It's just some of the cornerback contracts after that have gone up even more astronomically. So it depends on if they're willing to pay $20 million a year for a cornerback. When they signed Gilmore, I believe it was 13 or 14 a year. So we'll have to see. Hopefully they do, or if they don't, they find a replacement. But it's going to be tough if they don't sign him, getting a replacement that plays up to the level he's been playing the last 9-10 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's something that if you tag them for even this year, next year, it at least buys you the time to find someone.
Yeah, that's
Where
true.
I'd be a lot more comfortable than them trying to find someone kind of on the cheap. But they also might go that way if they might use this year as kind of a referendum where you don't pay JC Jackson $20 million if you're playing zone. You don't pay a zone cornerback that much money. You play a cornerback set $20 million a year to go man to man with someone. So if they're not going man to man, Bill might say, well, I don't need a great cornerback. I just need someone serviceable because I have the pass rush to get to the quarterback kind of disrupt that. And that's kind of how zone works, where if you have a good pass rush, you may not need top cornerbacks. You may not need um, a Gilmore, a Jackson, that sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see. Going on to our down, I'll start first. Mine was Carl Davis. He really got bullied around by the center, like I said, from the Titans. I think he had a really poor game, and I think was kind of the biggest reason for that run defense being so poor. And then an honorable mention to Godchow and Dietrich Wise on that front, but Carl Davis kind of took the biggest brunt of it. So he was my number one dud.
Yeah, I think my number one down, it was tough for me to fully pick one. So I'm just going with the run defense as a whole. Um, they were going up against the Titans, which they have been a really good running team this whole season, but that's mostly because you have the number one running back in Derrick Henry. Without Derrick Henry, two running backs that would be on most teams' practice squads ran for 270 yards against you. Two different running backs running for over 100 yards. So overall, it wasn't good. It looked kind of like how they were the first 3, 4, or 5 weeks of the season. So I just put the blame on pretty much everyone for not doing their job.
Yeah, exactly. Number 1, 2 dud. I got Miles Bryant. I think he had a pretty bad game in this. He would have been torched for a touchdown if Ryan Tannehill could throw the ball. And he had just a few other plays where he just did not look well in pass coverage. So I'd say Miles Bryant was my number 1, 2. It's a little surprising because I'm pretty high on him. So I was a little disappointed in the way he played this game.
Yeah, my number 2 down was Miles Bryant as well. Just one of probably his worst game of his career the last 2 weeks, which that happens. He's undrafted cornerback in the second year. So sometimes you just have those games. JC Jackson earlier this year had a couple of bad games here and there. So it happens to everyone. So I don't think it should be a problem going forward, but maybe the Titans found some things on tape that they could expose him, and maybe we'll see it in the future. But I just one bad game. We'll have to see going forward.
Yeah. And number 3, I have Trent Brown. Like I said, he had some difficulty in the run, and also the pass too. And I think he was kind of one of the reasons for their run deficit in the beginning. They had some issues on the edge, and then also in the pass game, he didn't look that great. He allowed a sack and I think 1 or 2 pressures in this game.
Yeah, I think 1 sack and either 2 pressures or 2 quarterback hits.
And I thought during the game, I was like, he's not looking right. Maybe it's just a blip game. Hopefully he's not hurt. He actually mentioned today that he's been kind of dealing with the calf again. But he doesn't think it's going to be something that sidelines him, but he also doesn't think it's something that's going to get 100% for the rest of the year. It's going to be something he has to deal with. So hopefully it's not something that kind of hinders him too much, because he's been kind of that cog in the offensive line that's kind of helped solidify that pass protection. Who do you got?
My number 3 down, I thought about Brown. I ended up going with Devin McCourty, which might not be fully fair to him, but the 2 long runs were a lot. He made terrible reads and terrible angles on that, which allowed it. The first one for, I believe, the 70-yard touchdown or 65-yard touchdown, whatever it was. He just took a terrible approach to the running back, where the running back could have been stopped after maybe a 15-yard gain, but ended up getting a 65, 70-yard touchdown. The second one, he took another bad approach, which allowed him to get 30-something yards. And I know he kind of forced the running back into JC Jackson, which allowed the fumble. But the approach he took, that was just another one where it was just another bad approach. And we saw that a couple of times earlier this year. I'm trying to remember the specific game. I know there was one where I think it was maybe the Cowboys or one of the ones earlier in the season where the Patriots allowed a very long touchdown of 60 something yards. And the reason why was McCourty just took a horrendous approach to the receiver, where he was the safety help from behind. Just something where it's another one where he just took a bad approach. But other than that, he did have some good plays. He's the one that forced the interception in the end zone. So he didn't have a bad game. It's just those couple plays were a little concerning to me, since we saw some of that earlier in the year.
Yeah, I could say I don't think it was his biggest fault. I think the biggest reason was that you shouldn't have the safety be the first line of attack for the run. Yeah. And I think that pass breakup he had for that forced the interception, and also kind of that forcing that fumble was pretty good on him. But
No, I
I
agree.
could also see where those two were there. Going around news of the NFL, Bills beat the Saints pretty handily on Thursday night, but I also think they also showed Allen's kind of true colors too, where he had 2 interceptions. Some pretty bad picks there. The Saints aren't the same team as they used to be. I don't know why they have Trevor Simeon starting the game anyway. You're paying Hill for either you pay Hill to be your quarterback or you don't go paying him to be a gadget man for the amount of money you're spending at.
Well,
And
Hill
so,
has been hurt the past few weeks. Peyton was saying that they were gonna, if Hill was healthy this week, that he'd be starting this upcoming week.
but he's active. If you're
Yeah,
active
but
enough,
I
I
think,
still think
yeah,
you're either active and you play or you're not, is how
that's
Bill
true.
usually says it. Um, so, but well, we could see from there. But they're also just not the same team as they were before.
Yeah,
And then we have the Chiefs had the bye, and then Colts ended up losing to the Bucks, which ends up helping out in the kind of the seeding order. But that Colts team is showing to be a pretty tough opponent, and I think it could be probably the biggest team I'm worried about going forward.
yeah.
Any thoughts on kind of those games that happened over the weekend?
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to watch the Bills Saints game just because that
Mm-hmm.
was the time when I had my Thanksgiving dinner out on the West Coast. So
Yeah.
just because I wasn't able to watch much. I from what I heard, Allen didn't look great. It's just they were playing a very inferior Saints team that's different than when the Patriots played them, where they're
Mm-hmm.
without Kamara, they don't have Winston. And then I know some Patriots fans were griping that, oh, well, how come the Bills got to face the Saints and we weren't able to face the Saints team? But I guess
Mm-hmm.
the counter I would have to that is we faced the Titans without five of their best players when the Bills lost to the Titans when the Titans were at full strength. So
Yeah.
in the end, it washes out. Colts lost. They played the Bucks very well. Lost, almost actually won after I think the 70 something yard kick return with like 10 seconds left.
Mm-hmm.
But they're showing that they might be a good, formidable foe. But something good for the Patriots is they're at 6-6 right now. The Colts might not make the playoffs just because they had such a bad start. They have some tough games remaining, including against the Patriots. Just another game from the NFL is the Ravens Browns game. I don't know if you had a chance to watch that,
Oh, I watched
but
that. That was garbage. It
yeah,
was, I would say, the worst football product I've seen in quite a while.
and it
Between the
wasn't a
two
Thursday night.
teams, and it wasn't a Thursday night. It was a Sunday night game, and the two quarterbacks looked horrible. I
Yep.
think we both know that Lamar Jackson is not a good quarterback. He's a running quarterback. He's not accurate. He makes a lot of mistakes. He's not accurate in the passing game. I was actually really disappointed from Baker Mayfield because every single time I defend the man, he ends up kind of throwing a deuce out in the field and doesn't look good. And he had a bunch of mistakes in this game, but I'd like to think it's because he's playing with like a hurt knee or a bum shoulder and also like a hurt foot right now. So I'm hoping that's the reason why. But both of them looked horrible.
Yeah,
So it
it was.
actually kind of made me feel a lot better about the Patriots position where, yeah, the Patriots have some issues. They don't look this bad.
Yeah,
So what it really only kind of shows you where the only teams, and we still haven't faced them yet. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Bills happens. But really, the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Colts are, and possibly the Titans are the teams I'd be afraid of.
yeah,
Everyone else so far is deeply flawed. And not to say the other teams aren't; they're also flawed as well, but not as flawed as some of these other teams.
yeah. Jackson just looked horrendous. Second week in a row, or second time in 3 weeks where he looked horrendous against the Dolphins. As well. I think it was the week before, maybe 2 weeks before, on
Mm-hmm.
the Thursday night. But it was the first time since I think 2016 where a quarterback threw 4 interceptions and their team still won.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of horrendous where your team gets the ball on 4 turnovers and you still only score 10 points. I don't know how much of it is due to the injury or how much of it is the Browns like quitting on themselves,
Mm-hmm.
but it's at least good for the Patriots going forward where Ravens haven't looked good the past few weeks. Browns don't look good at all. They probably won't even make the playoffs unless they beat the Ravens later on in the season.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, the only teams that really challenge your teams that we either haven't faced yet and we'll face later on in the season or won't face at all. Where Chiefs still scare me a little bit. They haven't looked great this whole season, but they do have a really good offense, really good quarterback, and they have the playmakers where they can score on you. And then the Bills will find out this week. I think this week, we'll get into this in a minute, but I think this week is going to be a huge challenge for them and a good measuring stick of where you are compared to the other teams in the NFL. And Colts, they have a really good running game. It just depends on which Carson Wentz shows up. He's been a lot better this year than he's probably his best season since 2017 season, where he was the leading MVP candidate before he got hurt. Not turning the ball over, playing very well, very efficient, but we'll have to see when we play them in a few weeks. That would be another tough game.
Yep. Yeah, I think kind of like what you said. I think this Bills matchup in this matchup in particular, but then also the future game as well in a few weeks are going to be a pretty big litmus test for the Patriots, where you need to at least split between them in order to kind of feel confident. If you go into Buffalo on Monday night in Buffalo on a cold night against a probably the harshest crowd that you faced this year, I don't think. Kind of looking back on it, the Chargers is basically a home game. Jets is the Jets. There was the Falcons, where there was barely anyone in the stands. And the Panthers, I don't really know how that was, but there was also a lot of Patriots fans there too. You never really had a harsh opponent, a harsh field to go into. It's not like you faced the Chiefs. It's not like you faced the Saints are usually pretty loud. Seahawks are pretty loud. We haven't kind of faced that environment, so the Bills is going to be a pretty good test for this team. I really don't have any worries about Mac Jones, just the way he's handled himself this year. Nothing really seems to bother him. But it's going to be a pretty big test for this team. How are you going to respond to a pretty good team overall? I think Josh Allen, we both agree he's taken a step back from last year. He still looks better than he did a few years ago. He's making a lot of steps. Part of it is I think he's grown as a player. Part of it I think is Brian Daboll. But he also shows where he tries to do too much, where he doesn't know to check it down. He doesn't know to throw away the ball. He tries to do too much and ends up causing a lot of issues where he gets a lot of interceptions that way because he just doesn't see everything. He's not always playing the smartest out of a quarterback. So that's still an issue with Josh, and I think it's something the Patriots can take advantage of. I think we know how Belichick feels about him. I also don't think he thinks he's the greatest quarterback that's out there. I think he's incredibly talented. He's one of probably the most physically gifted quarterbacks in the league. He's big, he's tall, he's fast. He's got a rocket arm. But that doesn't mean everything. You have to have the touch. You have to have the brains. And we'll see. I think the other thing with him as well is that he's running the ball a lot more this year than he had in years past. And that could be an issue for him, just maybe not this year, but if they keep on doing this with him, they're trying to have him do too much. I think this kind of caused their issues where they've been so heavily reliant on Josh Allen. They're not running the ball that well this year. And they're not committing to the run. And it's causing teams to know they can drop back in pass coverage. And that's caused some of the reasons why they've lost a few games of late because they know how to be defended against. So I think they need to kind of take some of the reins off of Josh Allen, put some running game into him, or else he's going to try and do too much, or two, he's going to get hurt. You can't have a quarterback running that much. I know he's big, he's strong enough, but eventually he's going to get hurt.
I agree. He has definitely taken a step back from last year, where he was a potential MVP candidate, but he's not as bad as he was his first 2 years in the league, where he was horrendous. I think he's still shown, especially this year, that he's prone to mistakes. He already has 10 interceptions. His career high is 12, and we're only 11 games into the season. So chances are he'll probably set his career high in interceptions for the season, maybe even set it Monday night, hopefully, for the Patriots. But he still has been showing that he has the athletic ability, and Brian Daboll is a very excellent offensive mind. So one thing that's actually a little surprising is the Bills are 11th in rushing yards per game. So and they're not horrendous. They do pretty well. It's just they're inconsistent. And showing how bad the run defense was last week for the Patriots, it could be an issue. I don't think it will be, but it could be. They do have, I think this is going to be a very, like I said a couple minutes ago, I think this is going to be a very good measuring stick for them. Very similar teams where they both have the 1 and 2 best defenses in the NFL. Stats might be a little misleading because the Bills haven't really faced anyone. Their biggest win was versus the Chiefs, I believe. And then let me see. They've also beaten the worn down Saints team. They've beaten the Dolphins twice, the Washington football team, Texans, Jets, but they lost to Jaguars, Steelers, Colts, and Titans. Colts and Titans, good team. Steelers, Jaguars horrendous. Steelers, middle of the road. So they haven't really faced a good team. So that's just one of the things looking at them is how to really compare them to the Patriots, where the Patriots have had a little soft of a schedule, but they've beaten some good teams. They've had very close games versus some really great teams. I don't think this is my thought going into the game. If the Patriots go into Buffalo Monday night and beat them, I think they win the division. I don't see the Bills coming into Foxborough after getting beating them the day after Christmas in Foxborough. Bills will probably lose to the Buccaneers later this season. So even if the Patriots lose to the Colts or the Dolphins, is going to be probably a tougher game than we thought a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. But I think if the Patriots win Monday night, they're going to sweep the Bills and it's going to be their division and have a home playoff game.
I think that's taking that one step forward. I think if they beat the Bills on Monday night, I think you've got serious talks about winning the number 1 seed based on that. Yeah. I think this is the biggest test going forward. If you can beat this test, the Colts is going to be a really hard game, but if you can beat both of those teams, you're beating the Bills at home, and then you're beating Jacksonville, and then hopefully you're beating the Dolphins. The Dolphins are playing really well of late. Going forward onto the kind of the over under for the game right now, Bills are favored -3. Over under.
Just a couple quick points to get into before we get into the over under. Bills are going to be without Tre'Davious White, who's one of, if not the top 2-3 cornerbacks in the NFL, who is one of their leaders on defense, but they still have a really good defense outside of that. Their run defense has been pretty horrendous, which is part of the reason why they lost to the Titans. They lost to the Colts, but those are also 2 of the best running teams in the NFL. So I think going into this game, expect the Patriots to run the ball a lot, especially early. And then that will lead the game or set up the passing game. Even without Tre'Davious White, they have a very good secondary. Jordan Poyer has by far the one of the best seasons for a safety in the NFL in years. When he's targeted in coverage, he has the lowest quarterback passer rating against in the NFL for a safety since I believe 2006 or 2007. So it's not going to be an easy passing game for Mac. The Bills know the Patriots offense. Brian Daboll knows what the Patriots do on offense. So he can relay that to the Bills defensive coaches. So I think it's going to be the beginning of the game is going to dictate how things go. If the Patriots are able to run the ball effectively, I think they'll have success and that'll set up the passing game. If they can't run the ball and they have to pass early against a good defense, might cause some problems.
Yeah, and I think just one other thing I'd like to add too, where you kind of mentioned about the schedule too. I forgot to mention where Football Outsiders has their kind of ranking of what teams' schedules are, and the first portion of the Bills schedule, they had the 32nd easiest. So they had the easiest schedule, so that it was ranked the 32nd hardest out of all football. Patriots, I think, was 30th, or it was up there too. So, and both of them go up considerably over the next few weeks. So it should be really interesting to see how they both go in this. So they both have kind of similar schedule strengths going forward. So,
one thing I just wanted to add a little bit too is one thing to just watch out as well is even if the Patriots if it's close in the first half, if they're able to pull away in the second half, or if they're up by a lot in the first half, they might just be able to win easily. The last 4 games, they've outscored their opponents 62-0 in the second half. If you include the Chargers game, it's 76-10, and 7 of those points was a garbage time touchdown for the Chargers. So if you take away that touchdown, it's essentially 78-3 in the second half, their last 5 games. against three pretty good teams. I know the Browns were without Chubb, but uh, they were still a decent offense, a pretty good passing game going into the game. Going up against the Titans, granted the Titans were without some starters, but even the Chargers as well. It's not like they're doing this like the 2019 first 8 games against horrendous quarterbacks and the Jets and teams like that. So I think that's just something else to look forward to, and that's where Patriots can do some damage if they keep the game close in the first half, or if they're winning in the first half. It's going to be looking like it's going to be good for them since they've been so dominant in the second half.
Yeah, exactly. So now going into the game, Bills favored -3, over under 43.5. Bills -3 basically means the house doesn't really know. They're only you get usually 3 points at home, so it's basically kind of a coin toss there. I'd be picking the Patriots in this, so I wouldn't have to worry about the points. So I'm picking Patriots. I think the under by a little bit. I would not be surprised if the over though. I would probably more lean to banging the over, but my prediction 24-17. So just slightly under the over. But yeah,
this was tough for me. Like I said a couple minutes ago, if the Patriots win this game, I don't see them losing again to the Bills' second game of the season. So going into this, I thought the Patriots are on a 6-game win streak. Can they win out the rest of the way or only lose one game against the Colts? I thought they probably finished 12-5. So I was thinking this is going to be their one loss, but watching them the last couple weeks, even going into this game, I thought I was going to be picking the Bills to win. But I have to go with the Patriots, the way they've been playing, the way the Bills have been playing the last 4 or 5 weeks. I think the Patriots win a very close game. I'm predicting 27-23. You hold the Bills to 3 field goals and then 2 touchdowns. Patriots still have some issues in the red zone, but they have to kick a couple more field goals. But I think it's going to be a very close game. I wouldn't be shocked if the Patriots blow out or win by 10, 20 points against the Bills, but I don't see them getting blown out like they did last year, their second game of the season. And then interesting stat I saw this morning was when the Patriots played the Bills last year on Monday night, the second game where they got absolutely blown out. It's a really different team than last year, even though it's one season later. Only 7 starters from those 22 starters last year are starters on the Patriots this year. The rest are completely different players that are pretty much improvements in every single spot. So it's a completely different team. I don't think you can really compare last year's game to this year's game. Also, having the crowd there is going to be a factor as well. Granted, it's a home game, so it's not like Josh Allen is going to be facing an opposing crowd, but I think that's going to be something to consider as well.
Yeah, agreed. It's going to be a pretty interesting game coming up, and will probably be kind of a season-defining game if they win this game.
And then I think it's not only if they win, but how they play. If they completely blow out the Bills, then they should get the number 1 seed or be in the running for it. If it's a very close game where it's back and forth, which we've seen even last year with first game, they should have won if Cam didn't fumble on that last drive. So it could be a close game. They sometimes, division opponents, they play close. But if it's a blowout, I think that kind of shows where you are in the AFC and possibly even the NFL.
Yeah, no, agreed. So hope everyone enjoy listening this week. Join us next week. We'll be probably posting around Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week, one of those days. Follow us again on Twitter, Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple or Spotify, and also on YouTube as well. Thank you very much, guys, and talk to you next week.